Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
8:06 on America's Morning Show. O'Connor and Company coming to you from Washington, the District of Columbia. Wherever you're listening, thanks for joining us. Coming up in 30 minutes, Emily Miller on the manslaughter case against Alec Baldwin. It's now in the courtroom, and she'll give us a first-hand account of what that's looking like. I'm Larry O'Connor. She's Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
I love my staff, but they add things. They add things all the time. At the very end. I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
Honestly, quite possibly the most relatable thing Joe Biden said about catching hell from one's wife. Joining us now, Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, host, of course, of the mighty Sean Spicer Show that you can see on literally every platform, including the First TV. I would check it out on YouTube. In fact, both Patrice and I appeared on his show earlier this week.
So
it's only right for us to return the favor. Sean, would you even consider that? Well, actually, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me ask you first. Good morning. How are you, Sean?
Good morning, guys. I'm introducing my...
Oh, no. Sean Spicer has a cold.
No.
I'm just doing that. I'm doing my Joe Biden impression.
Yes,
No,
I understand. I know how much you love it when a politician immediately starts blaming his staff like that on a public stage. What did you make of that moment there?
Well, I think it was payback. I mean, those guys. Here's a 3-day NATO summit, and they're like, "How about a 6:30 press conference?" And I had a lot of people that were like,
"You're sort of sympathetic to that."
Well, the guy tells him, "I need to go to bed earlier." Like, what if we push it back to 6:30? How do you think that? 3 days in NATO, and then we do that. And oh, by the way, your entire political future hangs in the balance. Anything you want to do before that, by the way, maybe we could get a workout in. I was like, dude, if you're the staff, you literally just sort of were just like, hey, what else can we throw at this guy to try to see if he can screw up? Oh, let's throw in a Lester Holt interview on Monday, just in case that's not enough. I mean, look, I don't like to blame staff as a former staffer, but my God, those guys set him up. I had a lot of people who are like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but do you think they're trying to push him out of the race? I was like, I don't know. Actually, look, that.
Well,
that,
Sean, Sean, we were on your show on Monday, and you asked us whether we thought that he would last through the end of the RNC next week, and both Larry and I said no. I think we've reassessed based on last night, and we actually think that Biden bought himself some more time. What do you think? Do you think last night was enough to stop Nancy Pelosi and Obama from giving him the hook?
Well, so the thing about, and you know this, Patrice, I mean, it's not, they can't give him the hook. He owns those delegates. Trump actually said it very well the other night. Like, they're his delegates. He would have to voluntarily step aside. And what I saw last night is a guy that has his heels dug in. I think there's a couple factors at play. Obama is probably the worst messenger on this because there is a huge chip on Biden's shoulders from the way he was treated in 2016 and shoved out of the way for Hillary Clinton. He wants respect from these folks. He thinks, as he said last night, I'm the guy who beat Trump. I'm going to do it again. I think the only person that really probably could affect him on a personal level is Jill, maybe his sister Valerie. But then I also think that, like, the top staff, the Mike Donnellan, Bruce Reed, Steve Ricchetti, I just don't think they're willing to give up power. And that's, look, everyone in the DMV gets power, right? Whether you're an administrator or a staffer running some agency or a congressional Hill staffer, you get the notion of power in D.C. And therefore, all these people around him have no incentive to give that up. So I think that being said, what I saw last night was a man that's determined. And he made a couple flubs, obviously. Although I do want to say this, and I don't think this is getting any attention, which is why I wanted to bring it to your audience. There's a new theory out there, which I'm willing to look into today, which is that Trump advocates for the 25th Amendment, and as you know, he's his vice president. So then Biden goes out of the way, and Trump ascends to the presidency right away. I think this is. I want to look into this a little bit more, but I think that the beauty is that now as his vice president, the race just totally changed because you can say, and get the cabinet to call it. Then Trump ascends to the presidency, and he saves all this money on the campaign. I think, and the funny thing is, I mean, who knows? Maybe he picks Harris as his vice president. And
it's right up there with Tulsi. I think we're actually getting a glimpse into the bizarre world of Sean Anon, where these conspiracy theories are floated on a regular basis. Trust the plan, Sean. Just on a pure, definite, because we're going to keep hearing, wow, what a press conference. Would you even call that a press conference? He had pre-approved reporters who had already been screened by comms. He only asked those reporters that had been listed. He didn't stand there and allow all the reporters to ask whatever they wanted. And I didn't see any questions that pertain to some of the things that are actually sort of burning issues, like no cabinet meetings for 9 months, the Parkinson's specialist. How can you not ask a question about the Parkinson's guy?
It's interesting that you bring this up, because logistically there's a lot that went into this in terms of where it was, right? So it wasn't in the White House briefing room, meaning the access is a totally different issue, because you can't just walk in there if you have a hard pass. And you're right. I mean, I thought, again, this is very inside the weeds, but Politico reported that it was Anita Dunn, not Corinne Jean-Pierre, that came up with the list of reporters. That wasn't exactly a vote of confidence for your press secretary. Look, I'm less bothered. Look, I would give just so people give the context, when you are holding a press conference with the president that day, the press staff's job is to say, okay, this is who's going to be in the room. This is what our suggestion is. So I would normally give a list to President Trump, and he'd look at me and say, shut up, get out. And then he would ignore the list. But because I don't think he cared. So I'm not as shocked. I mean, frankly, not normally with Biden, but the tradition is always that the staff will give a list to the president. That's not shocking to me. I actually thought it was a little weird the way he was, I have this list. Yeah. It's sort of like telling people the magic trick. Like, I'm now going to put this ball in the pocket, and I'm going to pull it out from behind my hand. And you're like, dude, you're ruining the magic. That to me, it's like he always sort of says what the magician is doing the trick. And you're like, wow, that's an optical illusion there, sleight of hand or whatever. And Biden's always just like, so I'm just going to pull this quarter from behind my thumb. It was sitting there the whole time. You're like, okay, the illusion's gone, brother.
Well, Sean,
it was.
But to pick up on that, so we have reporting now that in two separate other interviews, Biden either the interviewers were either fed the questions directly from the campaign, or the campaign went back and asked for the interview to be edited in a way that would help President Biden. I actually wonder if the questions asked last night were pre-approved, perhaps even pre-written by the White House. Is that another conspiracy theory?
I think it is. Yeah, it definitely is a conspiracy theory. I will tell you this, based on my experience and the questions that were asked, I don't think so. I mean, if they had been asked, they would be much more along the lines of the radio one. But the point, Patrice, that I think is worth noting is in two of the cases now, we do know that they were compliant, right? And the bigger issue that I think is there's an overarching issue, which is the compliance of the media. So in the case of these radio interviews that the president did, we know that they gave them 8 questions and said, you get to choose 4, tell us which 4 you're choosing, and they all agreed to that. But the bigger issue with the media is they all have known about this mental issue and concerns that senior staff and others have had, and yet they haven't reported on it. Right, so the CNNs, the Politicos, the Washington Post, the New York Times, et cetera. And here's the choice that exists. Either they knew about it and were complicit in covering it up, right? So the New York Times and all these people had literally, I think, were well aware of all these issues and chose not to cover it. In fact, gaslit anybody who brought it up. And if you say to me, Sean, I don't think that's true, they'd never do that. Okay, then they suck at reporting. You can't say that one of the two has to be true. Either you suck at doing your job because you never saw this and you claim that you have all these sources that never told you something that George Clooney was like, yeah, it was apparent at the event that you guys were at that we held in LA. Everyone's now coming out of the woodwork about all these events. So either CNN and the New York Times and everything are really bad at reporting and never saw what everybody says everybody saw for the last several months, or you guys were complicit in covering it up. And that's, to me, the bigger issue right here.
I agree.
Is that with President Trump, it was like, there's a guy who just watched an Instagram video on psychology who thinks that he's unfit for office, and we want to get the panel's reaction. And then with these guys, they're like, don't you dare bring something up.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, can you stay with us for one more segment, because there's some other aspects of your vast knowledge and expertise that we'd like to draw upon.
Yeah, I will tell you, staying inside the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Center, unless I can get GarageDoorRepair.com to open this thing up, it's a little stuffy in here right now.
Right.
You guys, I mean, so I can do it, but it's just, I mean, we got to.
I understand.
I'm going to talk to.
We have many other laudable air conditioning people that we could send your way as well. I don't want to name one over the other because there's plenty of them, but you nailed two of the important names that we like to mention. In fact, speaking of the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center, here is Jamie Whitten.
Sean, I'm breathing okay, so I'm going to open a couple windows for you. How's that? Let's get this going. We want Sean to stay. All right, $3.95.
Weeknights with Mark Levin, 6 to 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
We continue with Sean Spicer, who is not only a fantastic host of his show, The Sean Spicer Show, which you can get on, and you can also get the audio-only track on Apple or Spotify or wherever you like your podcast. And not only is he a former White House press secretary, but he also was one of the chief political and communications operatives at the Republican National Committee, whereupon he was responsible for 2 Republican National Conventions, 2012 as well as 2016, which means you're probably going through some PTSD right now, knowing this is the weekend before the convention in Milwaukee. What do you make of how the plans are shaping up right now, or what we've learned of them?
I actually enjoy being able to sit back now and watch it as opposed to having to live it. I think they're doing a great job in Milwaukee. I love how this is coming together. I think the way that Trump has instituted gotten himself involved in the platform to make it more. This is what it's supposed to be. I mean, I hate to say this. It's a much better document right now. I would have loved the pro-life language to be a little bit stronger to me personally, but you don't get everything you want in a platform. I like how it's being orchestrated. Look, at the end of the day, this is a show. We're highlighting our candidates, our policies to not just the country, but to the world. And I think that it's going to look fantastic. I like some of the speakers that they've put forward so far. It looks less stuffy. I mean, this is where Trump really shines, is as the showman, because he understands the optics of what people are seeing. And it looks less like a Washington-produced show than a New York, LA. And that's what I think he really brings to the table. And trust me when I tell you, he's personally involved in all of this.
So to pick up on that thread then, Sean, can we expect that the VP candidate who will be announced, it's going to be apprentice style? Larry and I were fantasizing about this morning, that it's going to be, Don Jr. is going to really just introduce everyone. The stage is going to be reset. You're going to see the big table, conference room table. Ivanka will come out, and then you're going to have like the row of contestants, the big names we've known, and maybe even 1 or 2 dark horses come out, and then he's going to decide apprentice style. Are we way off, or I mean, do you see that happening?
I talked about that on the show yesterday. I thought that would be great. Marco, your interview with Kristen Welker, really strong. Doug Burgum, I love the way you responded to Margaret Brennan, strong on that. J.D. Vance, holding your own with Dana Bash, amazing. And then, but I think that would be so unbelievable. I mean, it would be embarrassing for the people who didn't get chosen, but I will tell you, that would be great. And you eliminate them one by one. Although on the show yesterday, I threw that idea out there, and in fact, I think it was Chris DeGaulle, Larry, who said, what if instead, Bachelor style, they give them an American flag? They're like, everyone kind of
instead of a rose.
Instead of a rose. I thought, okay, that's a little tweak, and I'm sure there's some kind of intellectual property issue with The Apprentice, and so I don't know. Maybe that kind of does what you need to do. But anyway, I think that you're going to get an answer on Sunday. Anyway.
Sunday. I was going to ask you, when do you think it's going to be? 8 years ago, it would have been this day, Friday. He took to Twitter and announced it would be Pence, and then they had an appearance on Saturday. You think it's going to be Sunday? And do you have an idea of who it might be?
I do. So first of all, I would just say this: knowing it's not easy to just make that happen. So I don't know that they can change. But my guess yesterday was that if this press conference had gone really bad, they would let him bleed it out. I think that because it was a push, it was there was no. I mean, yes, he screwed up Putin. Yes, he screwed up Trump and called him his vice president. But I don't think that changes the dynamic ton.
What a low bar we have these days.
I know.
God.
Although Putin's like, should I call Trump now that he's vice president? I don't know. Look, I will just say that I think the first person has a name that's 2 letters.
Has 2 letters?
Yeah.
You think
only 2 letters? Oh, JD.
Well,
JD Vance.
That's where.
Yeah.
If I were putting money down, and I'm not saying I put $4,000 this morning down, but I mean, if I did, that's what.
Do you think it's because Don Jr. is going to be introducing the running mate? Do you think that was that the last clue for you?
I would say that I thought that was where the money would go the last little while.
Okay.
I also think that we could be getting it's Trump, and I think that I think Marco Rubio has done an amazing job articulating the policies of this president and the America First agenda the last several months. Watching him on TV is a masterclass. I think Burgum would bring some serious chops as a businessman. So I don't have a problem with any of them, and knowing Trump, I do think that there's always that attempt to throw a wrench into stuff so that you keep everybody guessing. But I'm not. I love all of them. I literally will not be disappointed with any pick that's been floated by them. That doesn't mean any name. It means any name that the Trump campaign has admitted is being vetted is good with me.
Got it. All right, Sean Spicer, thanks again,
Thank you,
as
Sean.
always, my friend. And thanks for, you weren't...
All right, Lisa,
thanks for having us on, too.
And thanks you weren't gratuitously mean to me, so I appreciate that.
Well, that's the thing, is because I'm stuck in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Center until the guys from GarageDoorRepair.com opened the thing. I knew I was trapped, and this was your new ploy, but I appreciate... Lisa, Jamie Whitten put out an entire little crudité spread that's amazing. So I just, I want to thank you guys for your hospitality. You really stepped it up a bunch.
You bet. And by the way, thank you for all of the great, entertaining big boy press conferences you conducted over your career. Although, honestly, were they really that big? Honestly, or
no, mine were bigger. Just so you know, I know.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:36. Chris Plant's coming up in just 30 minutes. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka on O'Connor and Company. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning, Larry.
All our eyes, of course, are on the NATO summit and President Biden's press conference and whether he is showing signs of further mental and physical debilitation. Debilitation? Is that a word?
He's debilitated. Yes.
Thank you. Or we're previewing the Republican convention and Trump and all that stuff. Well, one journalist's eyes are focused squarely on Santa Fe, New Mexico. The great Emily Miller, whose Substack is fantastic, emilypostnews.com. You should sign up for that. She is watching the manslaughter trial of actor Alec Baldwin. Emily, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I've been on your show many times over the last 3 years talking about Alec Baldwin.
I know. You
back.
are the master of this topic, and I love your latest headline is remarkable. He's got a new defense now, a new story, which is very, very different from every single public statement he has made, including that very memorable interview with George Stephanopoulos. What's his claim now?
Well, since day one, Alec Baldwin has said, since day one with the police, Alec Baldwin has said he shot and killed his cinematographer because the gun just went off. He did not pull the trigger. That was always his excuse. I did not pull the trigger. But then, as you mentioned, he went on ABC News and said, I did not pull the trigger. I did not pull the trigger. I never touched the trigger.
In fact, I remember he said, I would never pull the trigger. I would never do such a thing. Yes.
I would never do Like, he even said he knows gun safety rules. You know, the gun safety rules are never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot, one of the three. And he said he knew that, and said he would never do that. The gun just went off. Then that was almost 3 years ago. That was October 2021. Now, and then for the past 3 years, the state, New Mexico, has took the gun, sent it to FBI forensics. They did extensive tests on it and proved that the gun could not go off without, it's a revolver, but still could not go off without the trigger being pulled. So then they went a little bit further because Alec Baldwin's defense came back and said he can't be charged because this gun, there's a problem with this gun, there's a malfunction with the gun, and it can go off. And so the original conviction, the original charges against him were dropped because the gun could possibly go off. So then the state took it to another person, another expert on firearms, who proved finally exactly the gun could not go off without the trigger being pulled. Then he was charged again. Now he's in court, and suddenly in opening arguments, his lawyer says, well, even if no one saw him intentionally pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like a Washington thing. We would do it here in Washington, like there's one word difference,
Right.
And
right.
Now it's like, it's
so
like a legal thing.
Yeah, in other words, let me summarize. For the last 2 years, it's been, did you pull the trigger? No, I didn't pull the trigger. Did you pull the trigger? No, I didn't pull the trigger. No, I didn't pull the trigger. No, I didn't pull the trigger. And now that they're making their case in court, no, I did not pull the trigger intentionally.
Right. And who
Wow.
would intentionally? No one would intentionally shoot a friend or their coworker. And so it really undercut. So he's been lying for 3 years. It's totally obvious he's going to get caught. So they just went ahead and said, oh, possibly he did. And so now the prosecution going forward, starting today, is completely undercut because so many of their witnesses are there to prove the one thing that he pulled the trigger.
Well, so tell me what this means then also for some of the other people he's blamed. I mean, he's blamed Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who we know is convicted of manslaughter for putting a live round in the gun. He blamed even his victim for telling him to point the gun at her in her direction. Do all of those people suddenly, do they hold more weight? Is that what the defense is trying to claim? Yeah, he pulled the trigger, but he didn't intend to. And by the way, all these other people are really responsible. Do you think that's what the argument they're going to make?
That's exactly what the defense is going to make, is that everyone else is responsible. And today, actually, I'm glad you brought up, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was the armorer for the movie set, Rust. And she admitted in the beginning that she loaded the gun. She handed it to the assistant director, Dave Halls, who handed it to Baldwin. So she just clarified, she did not shoot the gun. She did not tell Baldwin. She asked Baldwin to do more training, and Alec Baldwin refused because he's an actor. She's supposed to testify today. And for the prosecution. So the prosecution wants her to testify that he refused more training, that he shot the gun. Well, I talked to her lawyer, and he said she is going to take the Fifth Amendment, take the Fifth on the stand because she's up for appeal, and they don't have a deal.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
So she will take the Fifth. Real fast, there's also this claim. Anybody who's been around firearms, and also anybody who just has a brain in their head, knows that if someone hands you a gun and say, here, go ahead, it's full of blanks, that before you do anything with it, you should verify that yourself. Everybody has a responsibility with a deadly weapon, especially if you're going to be pointing it and pulling the trigger, to ensure that it's on you. Are they claiming that because he's an actor, he doesn't have to adhere to those rules, that he has a special privilege?
Yes, literally exactly. Defense's opening statement was actors do not have to check their guns. It's handed to them. They don't have to do that. And actors pull triggers on sets all the time. It's very common. I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, and because it's not true.
So literally, I live by a different set of rules because I'm an actor.
Absolutely. That's the fancy. His fancy lawyers from New York are in New Mexico, and it's not going over well. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think in New Mexico, Jerry, even in Santa Fe, I don't think they're going to like that. All right, Emily, we're out of time. It's great stuff as always. Keep following this for us. We will be following you it over at theemilypost.com, and we'll have you back when we get a verdict. Thanks, Em.
Oh, take care. Bye, guys.
It's 8:40.
let's get through this NATO summit. It's terribly important. President Biden does a great job astride the global stage. Let's get through that and then assess. Well, that begins tomorrow morning. And the president pointed the way to his speech Monday in Austin, my hometown, at the LBJ Library. Lloyd Doggett, the congressman from Austin, is the first one to call for President Biden to give up the nomination. And he has suggested maybe the president goes to LBJ's library, commemorates, he was going to receive an award and commemorate the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. And then maybe he does what Johnson did and hand off the gavel. So that's already what some Democrats are starting to say.
Interesting theory from Paul Begala. By the way, that visit to LBJ's library in Austin is due next week during the Republican convention. What do you think, Patrice?
That's nice fantasy. We'll see if that actually happens. The way President Biden was talking as late as last night is that he is not moving. No one is they're gonna have to drag him out of office because he doesn't want to turn over power. Interesting. I did just see flash on CNN's website of their news site just now on TV. 17 Democrats, congressional Democrats, have now called for Joe Biden to bow out. So that's actually up from 2 last night. I have to find out who those 2 additional voices were, but I think we'll continue to see it over the weekend. More say no, Joe.
I think you're right. And in the meantime, Joe Biden is heading to Detroit to campaign in the state headed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is a name that people have floated as a possible replacement. Asked earlier this week if she thinks that the president should take another cognitive test. She said, couldn't hurt. That's a ringing endorsement. 8:52. All right, that's a wrap, Patrice. You have a great weekend.
You too, Larry.
And I think we're ready for the big boy Chris Plant show. Chris, will you be using a teleprompter like our president did last night?
As always. Yeah, the big guy press conference last night. Vice President Trump meets President Putin.
That meme is epic.
It really is.
Quite the summit.
But not bad enough for him to drop out or be kicked out yet.
Yeah.
But
they're kind of messed up, aren't they? I mean, what do they do now?
See somebody about gender dysphoria just for openers. They've got a lot of problems, and maybe Joe Biden is among the least of their problems. It's one party has gone quite mad. But we got a lot of that, and editing down radio interviews.